Please, what's the ideal amount of money to start up a business?
I know why you're asking that question. You started some business. You have some experience doing
Yes, because many people think until you have like 100,000, 200,000 before you start a business. But some people have like 30K and they don't know what to use the money for.
Right.
So what's the ideal amount of money to
Let me start with your experience. I know you were selling recharge cards and so on,
yes.
and you stopped the business.
Yes.
Why?
Because of credit facilities, debtors, and all that.
People were owing you money.
People were owing me money.
They didn't pay.
They didn't pay on time, and at the end of the day, I realized that I was at loss.
Loss of.
Right.
Oh, okay. What's the ideal sum of money?
Yes.
The sum of money is always related to the business, but there is a slight little catch-22, and that's part of what I'm trying to address. Typically, there's this thing called capacity. Okay, I'll digress a little bit. Worldwide, these statistics are from the UK. 85% of all businesses die in their first year. Yeah. Of the 15% who survive, a further 65% do not survive up to their third year. Very few businesses will go on to become big corporations, and even fewer outlive them. I can only think of 2 Nigerian companies so far that are in their second generation. Typically as well, what makes a business survive and go to the next level? It's all about structure and what we call capacity building, putting strength into the underbelly of the business. Studies show, and you know that's the sad part, if you don't have that capacity, but you put in money, typically the money either won't work well enough for you or you would lose it. But if you have just capacity and no money, it's still a catch-22. So when you talk about the ideal amount, it depends on the business. I'm sure there are businesses that can be started for 30,000 naira, 50,000 naira, 100,000 naira, 200,000, 200 million. But the key to it, I think, is to plan and to also get your figures right. Most people have to do what's called a business plan. Anybody here done it before? One person. It's typically regarded as one of the business owner's largest headaches. Until you do that, you don't actually know how much you need, because business is not about passion or I like or a hobby. It's about making profit. If it doesn't work, then it's not a business or it may not succeed. So, you know, it's when you can get that going properly. If you've at least put out some degree of structure and have an idea of your costs and the cost you actually need for survival, then it's only then that you know how much you need. An accountant should be a business person's best friend, but as entrepreneurs, you know, what we are is just full of passion. Yeah. We like what we're doing, we know we can do it, we can find those customers, and there's so many pitfalls. One of which you mentioned now is what I call terms of doing business. People owed you, you found it too difficult to collect the money, and eventually you got worse off, so you gave up. Right. How many years were you at the business? 1 year? 85% of all businesses die in their first year.
In their first year.
So how do you avoid debt?
Typically, you see, you can't avoid debt. What you do is manage debt. You cannot avoid debt because, you know, there are very few people who can. And the only, you know, there are a few examples. Like, I mean, if you go to a supermarket, you don't pay them on credit. But I'm pretty sure there'll be a few customers who can write them a check. Who can, so you can't avoid it. But what you must do is manage it. Now, those are all the sort of lessons, tools, experiences that you call building capacity. So, for instance, a way to manage debt, I'll give you about 2 or 3 examples. One way to, for instance, manage debt would be to be very clear and very forceful about the terms of collecting your money. If people, for instance, knew they had to pay interest on that money, they would be less likely to owe you. Some of it is also about putting things down in writing, so expectations are made very clear between all parties. There are other useful tools, but that usually kicks in when you're much further along in business and you're more formalized. There's this thing called factoring, which sometimes here is referred to as, in Nigeria is referred to as invoice discounting, where if you have a good payment that you're expecting, typically the standard of good here is a blue chip company. Maybe you supplied the goods, a bank will advance you money against it prior to when that debtor pays you. But personal debt is usually the hardest to collect because that is it's based on human beings' relationships. If you start that relationship hard, you get more business. So it's a catch-22. Businessmen and women have to be firmer in how they collect the debt by planning it and discussing it and agreeing it before the debt starts.
For students, quickly, along those lines, I mean, people are at the survival level.
Okay.
How do they do that?
First Business Toolkit, SME Business Toolkit, get that. You can either get it sales or you can get it directly from us. It's going to be all over the airwaves. You put it into a computer and it just asks you questions. It creates a business planner for you. It will ask you things like the sort of questions I'm sure you can answer. How much is a recharge? Your product then was a recharge card. It will ask you how much did you sell it for?